Classes in session.
How you doing? And welcome to on Learn 16 Classes in Session. Guys, this week I'm going to handle I've kind of avoided this topic for a while because I think it's so big and so multi-layered that I didn't A, know how to handle it in a TikTok, and B, I don't know if I quite know how to wrap my head around it even when it comes to a podcast, but we're going to give it a go. Today I'm talking about bullying. A lot of parents have asked me, how do you handle bullying? How does your school handle bullying? What are the strategies? What are the rules? All of that kind of thing. And for a long time, first of all, I constantly correct people because I don't like the term bullying. I like to call it what it is, which is harassment. So there's two levels of this conversation I'm going to have. Number one, we have to talk about our society, because what I promise you is that the teens and the elementary school kids that I teach, they don't create society. They tend to mirror it. And by mirror it, I mean it comes from their parents. I'm not saying that they aren't a force for change, but I am saying they do mirror a lot of the negativity that we then put upon them. And they see it in the real world. So I'm going to talk about society, and then I'm going to talk about in school. So why don't we talk, why don't we talk about in school first? Why? Because heaven help me, we can control it a little better if we put our minds to it at all. All right. So you have a kid that's being harassed in your school. Now let's take a couple of different forms here. All right. Let's talk about the difference between the kind of harassment that is, let's say, I don't want to minimize it, but I want to sort of put it in different categories, because kids have a banter, like it or not. And especially our young boys are taught a banter, and our young girls, we're starting to see it emulate across the board. We're starting to see this banter, and it's always been there, of a teasing nature, right? And we'll talk about that. Oh, it's just teasing you. They're just teasing you. Just get a thicker skin. Like, you're just chirping, right? They have all these different titles for it. So I'm going to put that over there for a second. And then I'm going to talk about underpinnings of harassment that stem from sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, these bigger underlying elements of hate and bigotry that might come from home, might come from the media, it might come from a lot of different places. And the way that they direct and push that out is very, very different. Because when you catch kids in the midst of back and forth, quote unquote, teasing, as a teacher, here's the problem. You'll hear it go back and forth, right? I'm sure a lot of parents out there will understand exactly what I'm saying. You won't have a moment where you're like, oh, you did it first. You're the cause. You're the foundation. No. They'll go back and forth. Don't put your pencil there. Oh, get your foot over there. Stop jiggling the table. I'm not jiggling the table. I hate your pants. Look. And it can go back and forth and back and forth. That kind of, let's say, poor socialized behavior or lack of socialized behavior, that can be handled in the classroom. That can be handled in the classroom by take a minute, take a breath, calm down. They're also young kids, so they're very quick to a higher level of temperament. They don't have a lot of self-control. They don't have a lot of impulse control, so it comes out that way. Hilariously enough, even though, please, I don't want to teach any more gym, I think a lot of that kind of behavior actually could be muted if we allowed them or encouraged them, and sometimes forced them into being physical every single day. I think they have a lot of energy, and sometimes that energy comes out in the wrong way. But let me talk about the bigger forms of, and also that kind of harassment, or bullying or teasing, whatever you want to call it, tends to come in ebbs and flows and not as fixated or focused. When it's focused, when you can see, or when you're become aware of an onslaught of that kind of harassment and it's focused, well, then you can deal with it on a different level. And the way that I deal with it is, first and foremost, always dealing with the student who's having the issue, who feels attacked, who feels harassed, or is being bullied, or whatever the case may be. And I sit down with them and I get that story. And as I get that story, I say, okay, I tell them what I'm going to do with that information. Sometimes those kids don't want me to do anything because the first conversation I always have with that student, um, is what's the dynamic? How can you, and you guys are going to take this like I'm blaming, but how can you stand up for yourself? How can you surround yourself by better people? Because sometimes we tend to want to be around people that don't necessarily treat us very well, but there's a whole host of other people who treat us well. And I'm curious on why we are drawn to the groups of people we're drawn to, and then we take on that kind of attack. So we have that kind of conversation. We have the kind of conversation that goes from, if they're your friends, because a lot of times this comes from your friends, have a conversation with one person at one time. Let's say it continues. If it continues, I then talk to the student or students who are perpetrating this. I sit them down, I ask what's going on, why are you doing it? I talk about instances and I talk about how damaging and problematic they can be. And if I'm really dealing with a kid who seems to spew vitriol everywhere they go, or really is the catalyst in a lot of different situations, what I tend to try to talk to that student about is what's going on in their house. In fact, I might lead with that. And again, I am not justifying, I am not, alleviating responsibility for any of their actions. But with kids, if we can't figure out the why and we just deal with the what, you're going to deal with the what every day until the day they graduate, to the day they get suspended or expelled. That's my belief. Right? Now, if we're dealing with something bigger, and I'm about to do a TikTok about this, if we're dealing with something bigger, let's talk about what I see. I think more commonly than anything else, because kids aren't stupid. They know they're going to get in trouble for. So what do kids try to do? If they don't like somebody, and heaven help us, we can't make them like everybody. It's not kindergarten. Not everybody's getting an invitation to the birthday party. If they don't like somebody, you can see sort of a collaborative effort to exclude. And that kind of exclusion and that kind of the bubble, the creation of this bubble around the person they don't want to be around for whatever their reason, valid or not. Because sometimes, by the way, we all have to take accountability of the different things we bring to the table. But that exclusion is incredibly painful, destructive, and I've seen more so than yelling about or teasing somebody about their clothes or their hair or their boyfriend or their whatever, is the exclusion and the segregation, the isolation that is horrifically damaging. Number one, you try to figure out, well, what friend group does everybody have? Because usually everybody has a place, right? You have a place where you feel like you get each other. And as adults, it's the same thing. Just wait till I get to adults. By the way, it's all our fault. It's not there. It's not. It's us. We're the problem. It's us. And then you start to see that, and you start to recognize the serious conversations you need to have as a school and to develop a school culture are questions of empathy, or questions of mindfulness, or questions of mental health and stability and outlets and therapy and good intention. Those are the conversations you need to start to have. And I'm going to lead into the other one that I'm going to talk about in a second, because when I start dealing with, and although at my school it's a bit different, again, I have the lovely ability of working at a very small school. So you can see it a little clearer coming. Anyways, the waves of racism, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, right? Any of that kind of bigotry that gets laced in, and usually gets laced in when they're kids as well as adults, with jokes. They lead with jokes. You guys know this. I know this. It's the number one defense of any student. I was just joking. And guess what? It's the number one defense of people in politics, of of comedians, of a lot of different people. I was just joking. It was all jokes. Can't you take a joke? Are you that serious? Right? So and then all of a sudden you feel like an idiot as the kid that feels harassed or bullied or is being harassed. And as the adult, how do I handle that? No jokes, no more jokes. No, you can't really do that because it just doesn't fly. And as an adult, guess what? I can't be there all the time because this is what's super clear. Kids will do whatever they're going to do, as will adults, when an authority figure is not there, when we're not in the room, whether it's at lunch, whether it's at recess, walking home, at home, on social media. So we can be the hall monitors that try to be in every space with every student, or we can create a different culture. If I heard racist language and, or anti-Semitic tropes or sexist language or, all of these things, homophobic, transphobic, then I need to recognize that even if it's a student, it's never just a student. Why? Because that student is saying whatever they're saying or acting however they're acting in front of others. Number one, either to purposely diminish one person or a group of people, and they're heard and their actions are bolstered, supported, or, and this is where I would love for us to get, condemned by their peers. So here's what I would do, and here's what I've done. Let's start using, because a lot of the times too, you don't know. So a student comes to you and says, so-and-so said this. And the person comes in and they said, I didn't. Here we are, right? They said this, no, I didn't. And we sit in the in-between, right? And if you can't prove something with a student, what are you going to do? It's very, I don't want to say it's like a court of law, but in essence it is. So-and-so said something, no, I didn't. They heard me wrong. They took it wrong. I was talking to somebody else, the list of stuff. And then you have students backing them up, right? Here's the problem, or here's I don't know if it's a solution, but here's the possible solution. You look at those kids and say, something's broken. I'm not going to sit here and say, and prove, I'm not going to bug each classroom and have cameras mounted to read lips and something's broken at my school if this is happening in my space. And so I need to fix the culture of my space. The culture is broken. How do I handle that? Well, you start taking days of your school, of your semester, in order to educate them en masse. Not to blame, not to point fingers, not to just let one kid, if they did or if they didn't, shoulder all that responsibility, because right there in that moment, it's not just them. And if it's not just them, I have a bigger awareness and focus to then deal with the school at large. And you can only do that with dealing with the school at large. So Metro will develop days that are focused on different kinds of education. If something really pops off and we get into the heart of some of these sort of bigoted kind of mentalities where it's funneling through our school, then we go class to class to class to class, take all the time we need, because you know what? We'll get to the math, we'll get to the history, we'll get to the drama, but we're not going to get to any of that in a thoughtful, credible, intelligent way until you understand how to be a good person and what that looks like. And even if it's one student that said it, 10 students listened. So to talk about what it is to be a bystander, or what it is to be an upstander, or whatever the hell that word is, what it is to stand up for the things that you think are important, no matter who's in that room. Because if one kid made the joke and 10 kids laughed, I blame all 11. I blame all 11 equally. Period. And I think You need to then start tackling the issue. You need to then, and you're not just going to do that once. You're going to do it again and again and again and again, no matter how many times it comes up. Now, if there's an instance where it's clear cut and it's clear cut that somebody said something or did something, you deal with that student directly. Of course you do. Of course you do. But it doesn't mean the culture's not broken. It doesn't mean you don't have a bigger job to do. And dealing with that student would look like figuring out why they said what they said, bringing in their parents, talking to their parents about what's okay and what's not okay. And I'll tell you, get real quick to the bottom of something when you bring in parents and you start talking about it on a bigger level. You'll get there real quick. And at that point, you get to decide, and the parents get to decide, and recognize I also work at a private school. Is this, whatever ideal of bigotry or hatred or whatever they're perpetrating, is this something, you're going to back as parents? Because if it's something you're going to back as parents, then this isn't the school for you. Now, I've worked at a school for 20 years, and I can not even on one hand how many times kids have had to leave that school. Not even on one hand. I'm not saying kids haven't chosen to leave, but on one hand, how many times we have chosen that. And it's because the vitriol or the animosity or the anger or whatever that's come out of the student's mouth is echoed, is supported, is magnified, personified in their parents' reaction in the way that they stand up beside that. So you have to deal with it across the board. But you set a culture. And you set a culture in your school about who's responsible. And I say this to my students all the time. You all are. You all are. I had this conversation not too long ago. I heard a student in the hall make some sort of joke, and they were loud, and everybody laughed. And I didn't know the kid. It was a new kid to my school. And I walked out and I said, unacceptable. I don't want to hear it in my school. And I pulled him aside and I had a conversation with him. More importantly, I pulled a student aside who I taught for 2 years. And I said, what are you doing? And he's like, what? I didn't say it, Joanna. I didn't laugh. I said, did you tell him to stop? Did you put him in his place? Did you quietly look at him? And again, some kids say things and do things to get attention and be funny and be all of those things. There's all sorts of motivating factors, right? Sometimes, a lot of the times, actually, I don't even think it's hate or bigotry. I said, did you tell him to cut it out? Did you pull him aside and say, not at my school? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, then you didn't do your job. Because that's your job. And that's not just your job when you're a Metro Prep. That's your job when you're walking this planet. And here's where we get to the bigger problem, guys. Heaven help us. And we love to talk about kids, and we love to talk about their problems and who they are and what they're doing and how they're doing it. But guess where they're learning it, folks? Spend a little bit of time on Twitter, and you wonder why they talk to each other like that, or why they think they can talk to each other like that. You look at our politicians, the way they talk about big, significant issues and people and human need and compassion or lack thereof, and you wonder why kids think it's okay to exclude, it's okay to marginalize, it's okay for somebody to make somebody feel like garbage for who they are because they don't quite fit the mold. Well, that's coming externally. And in fact, my argument would be if we stopped enforcing so much of our garbage on students and on kids, they'd be way ahead of us. That any of the damage they have, it's because we spilt it all over them. Right? We taught them that. We've shown them that in whatever sort of TikTok banter or Instagram post or Twitter, or the way families are, sit down at Thanksgiving dinner and uncle and aunt so and so have a lot to say, but nobody puts them in their place. Why? Well, they're the aunt. We're not going to rock the boat. Well, if we sit down at family dinner and somebody says something hateful, bigoted, and we don't believe that, and we don't correct them because we don't want to rock the boat, I promise your kids are leaving that dinner learning, understanding. You just leave it alone. It's not your business. Now, I am not telling everybody. It sounds like I'm telling everybody how to run their lives, and I do, let's be honest, like to do that a lot. But what I'm saying to you is this: you run your life how you want to run your life. But don't be shocked when the little people in your world start to parrot and emulate who you are. That includes me. That includes me. I don't know how much high school students emulate their teachers, but that includes me. So when I teach, let's say, and I am sarcastic, I'm not going to make any bones about that, of course. I'm a sarcastic individual, and that hurts some kids. And over the years, and my initial response was, grow a thick skin. I'm Generation X. Please, do you have any idea what? And then I started to learn that when a student doesn't understand the sarcasm, they're not trying to be unmanageable. They're not trying to be, problematic. They're not trying to be just a big pain in the butt. They don't get it. It hurts as though you looked at them and told them to their face that they are a garbage person. Why would I want to keep doing that? For the sake of my own kind of humor? I'm still sarcastic, and of course, I'm still to some level sarcastic in the classroom. I just try to be very, very careful. And if I ever noticed, or if a student ever says, or if I somehow in my head think, oh, maybe I didn't think that was a good, then I shut it down. Oh, and I apologize. And I own it. And I make the phone call to their parent, so the parent knows what went on that day, and that wasn't okay. Sometimes I have to push students, right? I don't mean literally, physically. I mean push them to do better. And in pushing them to do better, somehow, sometimes a kid can take me saying, you have to work harder, you have to you're worth more of a mark, you need to push, to them feeling as though I think less of them, feeling as though I don't think they're good enough. And in those cases, when I find that out, and sometimes I don't, but if I find that out, I have a talk with the student, I have a talk with the parent, and we readdress that. I don't double down on the way that I dealt with them in the first place. Why would I do that? Why would I want to double down just because that's the way that I like to communicate? It's not working. It's not working, right? And all of this comes on the heels, and I can't help it, comes on the heels of some of the most prominent bullies in our media system today who will say things like, your pronouns aren't my problem. You can be whoever you want to be. We have Jordan Peterson walking around as a historically very respected educator, now saying, forget you. I'll respond to you the way I want. Don't compel my speech. Don't compel your speech. Funny that you take it that way. So what you're saying is the idea of being respectful, the idea of acknowledging individuality, which by the way, Peterson loves. Peterson hates identity politics until it's men versus women. Then he's like, that's the only identity that exists. Heaven forbid you try what's the word? Not transcend that. But I'm not going to respect that. So I don't care how you feel. Okay. Okay. Something so minimal, right? Now, do I think that hurting feelings never happens? Of course I don't. Of course, it does all the time. It's not my point. My point isn't what we do incidentally, accidentally. My point isn't what we do as a byproduct of a conversation or of an action. My point is what we do, what we are made aware of that we are doing that is harming, that is hurting, and what we don't try to adjust. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's asking for perfection. But we have seemingly role models in academia, on social media, that believe that whatever their truth is, whatever their ideals are, take precedent over everybody else. And it's just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. How on earth can we ever hope that kids, that adults, that we start to operate in less of a self-driven, the world revolves around me kind of way. And isn't that what we're condemning kids about? Isn't that what we're talking to kids about? I don't understand. If we can't walk the walk, how can we hope that our kids are going to follow? How are we going to hope that the bullying and the harassing and the name calling and all of that stops when grown adults with power and money and, heaven help me, education? How do we transform what they're supposed to emulate? Well, the answer is we need a shift of culture. Just like we need a shift of culture in school, we need a shift of culture in this country, in this world. We need a shift. We need a shift of culture. And that doesn't happen overnight, but that happens with every instance and every conversation we get to have. Are we better than yesterday? Absolutely we are. Absolutely we're better than yesterday. But that does not mean that we stop, that we eliminate, that we reduce. You have guys like Ron DeSantis down in Florida emptying bookshelves so kids can't learn the bigger picture. So kids can only learn what he or what that individual political parties deem appropriate for learning. You have individuals like Jordan Peterson who wants to cancel things like feminism, Marxist theory, critical theory, African American studies, queer theory, gender theory. He thinks they all should be defunded, taken off the menu of public universities. What? That's more knowledge. I'm not asking you to take away international relation theory. I'm not asking you to take away, the political right and talking about right-wing politics and the ideas of what traditionalism can bring and blah. Look, put it all on the table. I just think there's a lot of people really upset that progress is definitely winning out, so they're throwing back, and they're throwing it back by bullying and harassing. And if you'll notice, they do exactly what our teenagers are being accused of doing on the regular as such a childish thing. They will point out one person. One person. You'll have a Jordan Peterson talk about Elliot Page. Or you'll have a Ben Shapiro talking about, Matt Walsh talking about Dylan Mulvaney. Focused on one person. And try to make them feel less than? Try to make them feel less than human, less important, less of value, and you wonder why our kids are acting this way. So we got to handle it by two elements, a three, if you will. Got to handle what goes on in your house. You got to handle the walk, the way you talk, the way you stand, the way you as a parent, as an uncle, as a grandparent, walks the walk. You're in a restaurant, you hear something bigoted said, you don't just walk away from it. I'm not asking please. I'm not advocating fights and scenes. I am saying not okay. Do you know if more people simply said to bigoted ideology in public space, if they more calmly went up and said, this isn't okay, I'm taking my kids somewhere else because I can't control how you speak? Because I truly believe, just like in high school, and I truly believe this in the better part of the bigger world, there are more amazing souls, amazing people who empathize, people who understand, people are just who are going to do good things. People want to do good things. They are scared because they feel alone when they're doing them in that circumstance. If you start doing them, just like if the kid stood up to the individual who said the ridiculous statement or made the other one feel like garbage, if they stood up and said, not okay, be better, walk away. We need a level of awareness. Now, I'm not saying excommunicate that person because, again, sometimes stupidity comes out of all of our mouths. It does. We should have the opportunity to, listen, think about it, to reflect upon it, to change, to own it, and then to try again. I don't believe that everybody should get, one mistake and that's it, that's all. But what I am saying is you still get called on it. You get called on it. You get a not okay for me. And you try to do better. But our teens aren't going to do that en masse without being taught. Because unfortunately, and again, no matter how much some people want to deny it, we still have elements of our society that are teaching, that are limiting the lessons our kids learn. They're limiting the history books, they're limiting the theory, they're limiting the ideas and the perspectives of the amazing, the powerful, the impressive diversity that we have on this planet. If we spent more time trying to listen and trying to hear those perspectives, the better off we would be, the more knowledge we would have, and the better decisions we would make. That goes for adults. Rather than trying to control the narrative, listen. And that, I promise you, will trickle down to our kids and will make them more powerful, more impressive little social beings who will and are changing the world. So threefold. In the classroom, I'll do my job. And if you're in a school, by the by, where this doesn't happen, where the culture's not getting changed by the teachers, or it's not being addressed by the administration, you have power. You have power. You have power with the school board. You have power as a parent. You have power to go to the media. You have power to talk about it openly. You have power. Too many times, people with hate in their minds and in their mouths who are trying to use that, manipulate, and work that way up for power are too freaking loud and have too many microphones in their mouths. There's way more great people in this world than there are those. It's just about time we all picked up a microphone. Right? And as a teacher, I will do my damnedest to educate, re-educate, and educate some more. I will take as much time as I need to address the curriculum I need to address and the school culture of respect, of awareness, of diversity and equity. And then we got to start demanding it of our politicians. We really, truly do. We got to say, no, that wasn't okay. You're going to have to sit this one out. You're going to have to maybe run again another time. You're going to have to figure out new ways to address your constituency without using it as a platform for hate and directed bigotry. And I think once we do that, so maybe we could take care of that next week, guys. If everybody could just pick up a shovel and we could just handle all this next week. We handle this, do it next week. And then maybe, let's say, come March, April, we tackle the whole environmental thing. Because at the end of the day, the beauty is we are smart, we are passionate, we are empathetic creatures. We just need to make sure we're not being manipulated quickly, a rise of fear, a rise of hatred, which is such an easy emotion to go to when you feel scared, when you feel unaware, when you feel that the unknown is pressing up. If you feel like you don't know, get to know. There are so many different ways, so many different avenues for us to get educated, for us to get aware, for us to truly understand people. And the bottom line is, the quicker you go to the simplistic solution is always when you're sitting, I promise you, in the wrong. There's always huge areas of gray, huge shades of gray, and it's up to us to have the conversation calmly, respectfully, until we figure it out. Nothing's ever going to be 100%, but we will get better. So I hope that helped. I hope that gives, I don't know if that gave any clarity whatsoever. That was a bit of a rant. I still think that conversation, calm, collected conversation on every single issue, no matter what walk of life you happen to be standing in, is the best possible way to end any kind of sort of harassment and bigotry and hatred. That, and let's be honest, guys, let's all just go to therapy. I think that would help, anyways. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. I will see you next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat station, and we'll see what else we can solve. Have a good week. Dismissed.